Hello and welcome again to Cherry Red TV. I'm Iain McNay and my guest again is Alan McGee.
Hey,
Hi, Alan.
Yeah.
And this is part 3 of the Alan McGee story. So hopefully you've seen part 1 and part 2, and if not, you'll seek them out. And Alan has a new book out which is called Alan McGee Creation Stories, Riots, Raves and Running a Label. And we're going to run through the latter part of this book and pull out some of the interesting stories and ask some in-depth questions of Alan. And he's also had some other books which concern Creation Records. The one I like the best, the Creation Records story, My Magpie Eyes Are Hungry for the Prize by David McKenna, which came out a few years ago. And Alan didn't like it at first, but he likes it now. And then there was Alan McGee and the story of Creation Records, This Ecstasy Romance Cannot Last. And last of all, there's the film, which I thought was great, Upside Down. I should hold it upside down, shouldn't I? Which is out on as a DVD. So, of course, Alan, as probably most of you know, started and ran Creation Records, and then left to start Poptones, which we'll talk about. Went on to manage Libertines, Desert Pretty Things, Carbarat. So we're going to look at your life, the latter part of your career there. And I'd just like to start, because we finished the last programme, you'd had some personal troubles, a bit of a breakdown, and been in rehab, come back. Oasis were #1 with the first album. And I wanted to ask you, many people say to me, Liam Gallagher must have been really hard for Alan to work with. What was Liam like?
Well, the Liam that I knew then, because I don't really know Liam anymore, because I live in Wales and he lives in Hampstead, so you don't really run into each other. But the Liam that I knew back when I was working with him for like that 7 years, you know, from 93 to 2000, he was always great to me, to be honest. We had a few run-ins where he'd be sitting there shouting at me, right, you know, about something like, I don't know what, I can't even remember what it was about, but there was a couple of moments like that. But overall, I would have to say it was positive. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, you know, I think probably as he's grown up, he's probably changed a bit, and we've run out of contact with each other, which is kind of a bit sad, but it's just the way it goes with life.
But when an artist shouts at you, how is that for you? How do you respond to that?
Do you really want me to tell the truth? I don't take it very seriously, because if I was being honest, like, there's very few, the only people that really remember what they said the next day are people like Noel Gallagher or Pete McLeod, and they just all move on. So whatever they're shouting about, I know they're going to forget it tomorrow. So I just let them shout and have their hissy fit and then move on.
So it doesn't affect you, you don't take it personally?
Nothing affects me like that, man. I genuinely just, I mean, it sounds kind of cruel to be kind, but because I don't take it very seriously, do you know what I mean? You know, and then it kind of like, it's been my biggest support system in dealing with artists, because I don't take it very seriously. When they're kicking off so badly that it's off the scale, you just go, well, you know, it's a tantrum, whatever.
Yes. And with Noel, what was your relationship like?
Well, Noel's different. I mean, I've still got a very good relationship with him, you know, and you know, I email him. He's got an iPad now. You get the iPad message within 24 hours. It used to be text, now it's iPad. We run into each other about twice a year. Not deliberately. I mean, I'll be in Tokyo doing a gig. He'll be playing a gig at the Budokan. I'll come backstage. Do you know what I mean? You know, he started to take in giving me big hugs, which is actually very un-Noel-like, because he's like, you know, he's not a huggy person, you know, but he started giving me big hugs recently, so that was a bit strange. And then I saw him in Bologna last year as well, and do you know what I mean? You know, I mean, it's difficult being Noel, I think, because it's difficult being Liam, it's difficult being either one of them. Everybody kind of wants something, do you know what I mean? You know, and when really you're just actually in town and wanting to say hello,
Yeah.
it's kind of like complicates everybody else around them, because they probably think you're there to kind of try and get me to do something, when actually you just want to say hello. But
Yeah, no, I understand.
but that's just, I suppose that's the nature of being a big rock star, you know.
So, Oasis, the stage we got to last time, they become huge.
Yeah.
And then I know in the book you talk about Nebworth,
Yeah.
when they played Nebworth, really being a defining moment. Just talk us through that.
Well, that
how
was only a defining moment for me. I mean, I don't think it defined them, but it definitely helped define me, because I knew that it had got out of hand. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's, you know, I wasn't in control, obviously nobody is, of 125,000 people, 150,000 people. I met however many people Nebworth hold. And it was a bit weird, do you know what I mean, to have that amount of people at something that I'd found at King Tut's Wawa Hut 3 years before, playing to 12 people. And I mean, it was very...
Was that quick, was it? 3 years from 12 people to 150,000?
May 93 and August 96.
It's incredible. Yeah.
So, and they were doing Nebworth, two sold out Nebworths. And the bit that it really came home to me was when the fireworks went off, and I went AC/DC, you know, and you remember the band AC/DC?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
They would put out fireworks when they did outdoor gigs, and I just thought, you know what, this is so far removed now from kind of why I was interested in the first place. Do you know what I mean? You know, it's a bit like we've achieved it. I mean, when me and Joe started Creation, it was really to put punk and psychedelia together as a musical kind of like dish. Do you know what I mean? Or a musical vision, or whatever you want to call it. And we'd achieved that. I mean, there was 125,000 people watching them do I Am the Walrus in a punk way. How far do we want to take it? I mean, I did have an idea about like going and playing a gig in the Antarctic and doing pay-per-view, and do you know what I mean, on cable TV, and that was one of my ideas that nobody liked, but that would have been actually quite a good way to follow up Nebworth. But I mean, it was just, I mean, I knew that I should get out. The thing that stopped me...
So it was the end of something for you, in a way?
Yeah, it was the end of... Well, I knew that I'd read the book, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
And
you knew
now,
the ending.
Yeah, and I'd read the book now, and it was a bit like, you know, I was really hanging about for the reviews. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. And slightly before that time, you met Kate Holmes, who became your wife, and she was in several bands, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Client, Fraser Chorus,
Yeah.
Scuba, Sirens, Technique. So she was a musician, and you just talk us through how that happened. How that changed you.
Yeah, well, I'd come out of rehab in November '94, October '94, and then January '95 there was a slow dive kind of album launch thing that Creation were very good at doing. They would love doing their album launches, because we had an artist liaison department by that point. And Laurence, who was my friend, brought her along. And I'd always fancied her because I saw her on the TV.
Ah, okay.
And it was quite funny. I was showing my daughter the video that I said, oh, that's when I first saw your mum. And it was this Fraser Chorus video called Cloud 8. And she's an angel going up the way and stuff like that, right? And Charlie, my little girl, was like saying, you know, as little girls do, 13-year-old girls going to her mum, Mum, how did you straighten your hair? Your hair looks so weird, Mum. You know what I mean? You know, she was asking her all these questions. But, you know, but yeah, I mean, I met Kate, I'd always fancied her, and then she kind of took the reins, I suppose, and really kind of nursed me back, really. You know, I don't know if I would have made such a quick kind of recovery, really.
She was quite tough with you, wasn't she?
She was, yeah. We had about 6 breakups in that first year and a half.
Yeah.
And then, you know, because she was quite tough with me, and I remember her and her friend Michelle going off to Jamaica and me being left Christmas '95 in London because I couldn't get on a plane because I'd fear of flying. Yeah. And that really worked. Funnily enough, it kick-started me, and then she went, well, let's all go, and we'll go with a big group of girls. I've always got on well with women, so it's a bit like, So I'm kind of into that, and and we went to Main Road, and I'd been very, very, very. I wasn't being weird. I was just genuinely, really uptight about moving out my comfort zone, which was London, and we went to Manchester, and I enjoyed it, and that was the breakthrough moment, really, of me getting back on the horse. I mean, I was busking it, I would say. I mean, I was there and I was making decisions, and I was still saying Mellowed Out's the Teenage Fan Club single. Could still do music, but as a person sitting here with you now and could talk about anything, I was busking it. Do you know what I mean? I was like,
Somehow she helped you get back a confidence, didn't she?
Yeah.
By being confident. Because I read last night, for enough, there's a chapter that interviews Kate in this book, and she was saying, that she basically said this is the way she wants it. You didn't do it.
Yeah.
She'd just walk away.
Yeah, she did.
And everybody else, from what she was saying, basically said, "Oh, Alan, that's great."
Yeah,
went along with you, so she stood up to you.
Yeah, I was surrounded at that point, Iain, by Creation. Anyway, they were probably a very unpopular interview after I say this, but I was surrounded by a lot of sycophants, really, that just told me I was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I was amazing. I was making about £8 million a year at one point, right? Do you know what I mean? And but that doesn't make you amazing. It just makes you amazing to other people.
It doesn't help you move forward in life.
No, it doesn't. It just makes people say yes to you.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And she didn't buy any of that. So she would walk off the football pitch and go to Wales for 2 weeks. But that's before we even had a place in Wales, because she comes from Wales. And it kind of got me up to speed. It toughened me up again, Iain.
Yeah, yeah. Something else I picked out that I thought was interesting was that because you were so different after you'd given up the drugs and the drinking, that something changed in your mind, because you thought that everybody wanted, this is a quote here, people wanted Alan the Whirlwind, Alan the Car Crash, but then you learned that people actually liked you because of you, not what you were trying to be, and that was quite a surprise for you.
I think, I'm not sure they liked me before, but once I had changed, I remember being in weird things, like there was a Blur party, and I was sober, and I got invited, and I went, and I was they literally were looking at me quite strangely. It was in Camden, in the Parkway, and it was in this little place off the Parkway, in this wine bar, and Blur were having a party, and Justine Frischman and Damon were there. And I remember everybody looking at me, because we were supposedly at war with Blur, and they were looking at me going, "Why is he here?" Do you know what I mean? But it was because I was so open in these days because I'd got off the drugs, and I was really uncynical. Do you know what I mean? So I was like, well, if you hate me, you hate me. If you like me, you like me. And it tended to make people like me because I was open. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And then you got this phone call from Margaret McDonagh, who was then the General Secretary of the Labour Party. Yeah. And that opened a few doors, didn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's probably, well, the real story of that, briefly, is I'd get sober and I thought, we've got to get Thatcher out, I'll pay my £15 to the Labour Party and join the Labour Party. Right? I've never put my cards on the table where I am, so I'll do that. So I joined the Labour Party in the end of '94, got out of rehab. And by about '96, they hadn't even sent me a card. They just kept cashing my £15, right? So then I was like, okay, whatever, right? And then we got a phone call through Margaret McDonagh, the General Secretary of the Labour Party, for Alan McGee. And this is now post Morning Glory. So she phones me up and she goes, "Are you that Alan McGee that is in the Labour Party?" And I went, "Yeah, and you haven't sent me like a membership card or anything. You've not sent me anything, but you've cashed my cheque." And she went, "We'll see you in 2 hours." And her and two Millbank worker bees showed up at the office and spent the afternoon with me. And out of that, they then said, "Well, can you get Noel for the Labour Party conference?" And I was like, "When is it?" And they went, "Monday." And this was on a Saturday, and this was Monday. And I was like, right, okay. So I phoned Noel that night and I said, he just come back from America, and I said, "It's the Labour Party, right? They want you to go and do an acoustic thing." And he was a big Labour Party supporter as well, and he went, "Well, I'm too tired, dude. He goes, think of something and just give them it. I went, so I phoned him back about an hour later and I went, well, what about a platinum disc? And he went, yeah, just give them that. And that's how it happened.
Okay.
That's how we got into, that was the start of the thing. So I then, we took it from me giving Blair
so you went up to Blackpool
disc
for the conference.
Yeah, we went up to Blackpool.
You gave him a disc.
Yeah. And took Ed Ball with me.
Yeah.
Ed Ball somewhere has got tickets, photographs of him and Tony Blair. It wouldn't be on an iPhone, but he's like Ed Ball going like that, and Tony Blair,
Yeah.
And you could see it was kind of like the British version of kind of like Bill Clinton or something. Do you know what I mean? Because it was like the MI5 or whoever looks after him were like 2 minutes to Tony arriving, 1 minute to Tony arriving, 30 seconds to Tony arriving, Tony's arrived. Do you know what I mean? It was like really weird. And then it was me, Andy Saunders and Ed Ball, and Ed got his picture taken with him and all that. And then I presented him with a disc, and then I don't think we thought anything else of it. And then they sort of involved us a bit more.
But you say in the book that what astounded you was you went back to the hotel afterwards.
Yeah.
And every hour on the news they had pictures of you and Tony Blair.
Yeah.
And you spent just a few seconds with him, really.
At that point I ended up having some good conversations with him over the next couple of years, but at that point we probably spoke for about, in total, 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean?
And you on the news every hour.
Yeah. We then kicked about the bar, me and Ed, and it was boring. It was like loads of like indie kids, as in male indie kids coming up and saying to me, "You are great. Here's my CD."
Yeah.
I mean, there was no upside to any of it. We were like, we're not even going to have a good laugh. We were hoping there might be some like mad New Labour girls that were like up for like having a laugh, and we were like, oh, this might be quite good fun, finding out, where their heads are at. And it was all these kind of like mad, studenty kind of like New Labour kind of like guys for the North East England. So it was about like, so after about an hour of getting told, this is fantastic, blah, 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 I love Oasis, I just went, do you know what, let's get out of here, right? So I went up to my room, and then I was sitting, it was a crap hotel, I can't remember what it was called. And it had only one channel, bar BBC One kind of thing, and it was Sky. So I put on Sky. It's 2 a.m, Iain, and the first thing of news is like, me and Blair. And I'm like, God, that's a bit weird, because I'd never crossed over before. Because although you think, you were quite famous at that point, I wasn't. It was like, I was like, maybe in the world that we frequent, in the music world, I was well known, but I wasn't known outside that world. But anyway, I was on the news, and I was the news item, and I stayed up for the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news, right? And it was amazing, And I was like, really, And that was probably the first time I ever felt a little bit famous. And then, but anyway, it was fun. And then,
and you were invited to Downing Street, weren't you?
Well, then we were invited to the Royal Festival Hall, and they won. And then the biggest cheer ever that I think I've ever heard was Patillo getting knocked out.
Oh, it's the election
everybody
night.
Went crazy.
Yeah.
Literally, everybody went crazy.
Yeah.
So I don't know why Patillo was, because he's quite liked now, isn't he? But I mean, overall, people quite like Patillo, but it's like, he was despised at that point, right? I don't know why. I think they saw him as the son of Thatcher or something. And they got the biggest cheer.
It was what he represented, I think. It wasn't so much him as a person.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. But he lost his seat. And then out the blue, they invited us to 10 Downing Street. I had no problem ever going to 10 Downing Street. I just thought, that's going to be interesting. I'm going to quite enjoy that. So the bit that had probably shocked me was know when, because I didn't think he would go. So you went
in a limousine with Noel and Meg and you and Kate.
But they thinking through that, they knew that I would probably go. I think they probably thought he wouldn't go, and Meg had decided for Noel, really, I suppose, that he was going, and they went. Do you know what I mean? You know, so we went, and it wasn't a limousine. It was a chocolate brown Rolls Royce that I had bought him, right? And so it was only £8,000. It wasn't that expensive, right? So anyway, we went in these chocolate brown Rolls Royce, and it was very funny moments to that night that, you know, I say in that book, but the book's out now, you know, in another 2 weeks by the time this goes up, so it doesn't really matter. But we arrive, we walk down the Walk of Shame, and we walk into 10 Downing Street, and literally there was about 400 paparazzi clicking us. It was like, you know, as near to being Rihanna as you're ever going to get, right? And we got our photograph taken, and then we went on in, and then all the paparazzi were all inside 10 Downing Street. Noel shook Tony's hand, front cover of that book, and I don't know, 100 photographs get taken. Tony said to Noel, this is the picture they all want. Noel laughed. And that was kind of the night. And then my missus, Kate, got pissed. She wasn't embarrassing, she was just funny. And she ended up chasing Tony Blair around with a Groove Rider remix going, I'm in a band.
Trying to give a copy of the CD.
Yeah. So it was like, you know, you could never underestimate the power of women in bands. Do you know what I mean? You know, it's a bit like, you know, how mental are they? Do you know what I mean? You know.
Yeah. Something else that I picked out that I thought was interesting was that Prince Charles tried to make contact with you.
Yeah, around that time.
And he invited you 3 times to Buckingham Palace, but you always said no.
I couldn't personally do it. I probably regret it now, if I was being honest. One of the few regrets I've ever had, but I probably do regret not going. And a lot of Scottish people go, why is he saying that? But look, I don't like the royal family. It's well known. It's, you know, I've been a lot more vitriolic than that in a lot of publications and books. But the reason I should have went, this is before I'd become vitriolic about it or anything, right? But I'd never liked them. I couldn't bring myself to do it because I saw myself as selling out to Scotland, really, to go to see the royal family that nobody in Scotland even believes in. So I was a bit like, you know, I can't do it. I just can't do it. And it was on the mantelpiece in Clifton Hill where we used to live. And Kate was like, we need to go. You know, and he asked us for supper 3 times. And we never went. One of the times was with the Creative Industries Task Force, which should have been me and Paul Smith and Branson and all that sort of mob. And then the other couple of times was just me and him. And I never took the invite. And see, the thing is, what I found in life at 53, if you don't meet up with people, you don't know
what they're like.
Yeah. So you kind of have to. It's a bit like, you know, you going and meeting our American mate. It's a bit like, if you don't go, you don't know.
Yeah.
You have to go and suss them out.
Yeah.
Because you can do, the world's amazing with technology, and right, you can like go, you know, like I've got to phone Pete McLeod at the end of this interview, and he's like, can you give me a call? I'm going in with Iain for like 2 or 3 hours, do some interviews, I'll be back, phone you in a minute, right? He's one of my best mates, right? But the bottom line is, it's like, you know, unless you meet people, you don't really know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, so you have to. I mean, I know it's an old expression, but you have to break bread. You don't have to have a meal. You can have a cup of water or tea with them, but you need to sit with them. And whereas with 359 and Cherry Red, we've got a guy, Matt Bristow. I had no idea that. I thought he'd be really dry and, you know, like maybe dysfunctional. I don't know. And he was the nicest dude. And I was telling him about Laz records that he didn't know about early recordings, and Matt went away and bought them, and I went, the Laz live at the BBC, get that, that's the best record, it's better than the album. Matt went and bought it.
Yeah.
No. So you never know with people.
No, you're absolutely right. So I wanted to get back to how it was at creation at this stage, because you were still, we covered at the end of the last interview that you'd actually got a lot of money for creation, but it was still, it was ultimately owned by Sony, but will be in a few years, but you were still running it with Dick. But somehow it wasn't working, was it? You were going in the office, you weren't really enjoying going in the office.
No, not anymore.
You were a little bit taking the piss from Sony because they had a helicopter that you would go off in the helicopter to watch football matches and things. And
well, I would go to Ireland in the helicopter, but I'd go in the limousine to the football matches.
Yeah.
I was taking the piss, but only because I knew they were taking the piss back. I mean, they would we'd 7% of the British...
the market,
British market share, right?
Yeah.
And so we had 7% of the market share. They only had 9 or 10%. So you can imagine that we were like, Sony were running at 17% of the market share. 7% was me that I had brought to it. So I just thought that to commandeer the limo was fair dues, really.
Yeah.
And nobody really said no to me. So of course I just continued going with it and did so really for about 4 years, really.
And you got to the stage, you'll say in the book, of going in the creation office. There's about 50 staff there.
Yeah.
But you only actually liked about 6 of them and talked to 6 of them. The other ones you didn't really connect with.
I wouldn't call it I didn't like them. I didn't really know anything about where they were at. And I definitely didn't know what they thought of me. They probably didn't like me. You know, I was quite awkward and strange. I mean, they were... Like you can't fault a load of young people who, like, we've got the biggest band in the world at this point, 96, 97, and, you know, their weird Uncle Alan doesn't take drink or drugs and is, like, on chamomile tea, and they've got to deal with me. I mean, it was like, to them it must have been like, he's a freak. Do you know what I mean? I don't really blame them. Do you know what I mean? You know, I would have thought I was a freak probably. You know, well, I probably wouldn't have thought I was a freak, but I thought I would be very dry. I was really dry. And, you know, but at the end of the day, no matter what way Andy wants to cut the cake, I did find the group. And the group were selling the record, 50,000 records a week. And that went on for about 4 years. Yeah. So at the end of the day, you know, I might have been a freak, but I was a freak who was selling records.
Yeah. And you actually re-signed the Jesus and Mary chain.
Yeah, that was more like Bob shoving me in here.
So this is Bobby Gillespie.
And we had this song Cracking Up, and I knew that was a big song for them. And then Bob went, McGee, you got to do it. And I just went, yeah, you're right, we have to do that. You know, because basically without the Mary chain, we wouldn't even have probably got Creation established.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You know, because that first single really made people take it seriously.
Yeah.
Upside Down.
And your last signing to Creation was Kevin Rowlands from Dexys,
Yeah, well, funny enough, he wasn't actually my last signing, but it was one of the last records I ever put out.
Yeah.
But it was about 2 or 3 years in the making. I kind of did upset him a few times because he was just on recovery himself. And I was really quite raw in my own... I didn't polish anything I said around that time, you know. I mean, you know, even to Noel Gallagher, I would go, well, like, Acquiesce is a better song than some might say. And he would take great offence at that because you weren't meant to say that to him at that point, really. And to Kevin Rowlands, I think I said something like, oh, I won't go in here, it's too personal, but I said something that hurt his feelings a little bit. And he ended up going on holiday for 3 weeks after it, which is ironic considering that everybody had been telling me that I had to watch my back with Kevin Rowland because he was a little bit handy and violent. And all I did was say, oh, I'd made one comment and he went on holiday for 3 weeks. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, we kind of, when he got back, we decided that we should put somebody else on it.
Interesting was, that thing for me was, he came in your office.
Yeah.
He played an acoustic version of a song.
Well, he didn't even play acoustic, he did it a cappella.
A cappella?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
He just sang it. And you said you'd sign him straight away?
Yeah, I did, yeah. But also the accountants had said something like, if you don't use some of this money up for signing some bands, you know, you're going to have to pay a load of tax. So go and sign some bands. Yeah. And and there wasn't, as in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of good music to sign. It wasn't like now.
This is the old-fashioned way of doing things, though.
Yeah, I know.
Because it used to be in the early days, that's what bands did, or artists did. They went in and they actually played a little gig, sang, and actually I'm friendly with Paul Conroy, who he used to run Virgin, and he told me that when he signed the Spice Girls, they came into the office and they sang in his office, and he signed them after that. So that for me is kind of a wonderful way of you really experiencing the artist rather
Yeah.
than the manager comes in,
Yeah.
plays you a well-recorded demo or whatever.
Yeah.
So you were going back to basics with...
Well, I did it. It was Kevin that was doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
I had Kevin. I met Kevin in reception, and he had a fur coat on. He had kind of suede kind of shoes, but they kind of went up like that. So they were like almost like kind of like, I don't know what you want to call that, but they were like
winkle picker shoes.
no,
kind
it
of
wasn't
thing.
even winkle
Yeah,
pickers.
yeah.
Shoes that they go up and they curl.
Okay.
So he had kind of shoes like that on, and he'd very eccentric gear. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
On right. To me, he looked as if he was like kind of like, like almost a royal aristocrat, possibly without the crown. You know what I mean? But he was verging on that kind of dress sense. And we met him, and I met him anyway. And then when he went, look, I'll sing you a song, and he sang a song that later became on a Dexys record, Manhood. And he goes, this is my manhood, this is my manhood, right? But it was because Kevin Rowland's such a great singer, I just went, it doesn't get any better, because unless you've got Neil Young or Paul Weller in your office playing you the songs, I mean, who else do you want, really? Do you know what I mean? So I just thought, all right, we'll sign you. And it wasn't, I mean, it was, I think we signed it for 100 grand, but in the scheme of the creation at that point, when you're selling 50,000 records a week, Iain, so you're making $250,000 a week, you know what I mean?
You're doing well.
Really, at the end of the day, it was nothing, really. Do you know what I mean?
Although you had a controversial sleeve and the record sold 700 or something.
Only in England. I mean, Q, by that point, I'd become unfashionable in Q magazine by 1999, 2000, and they wanted to take the piss. So, okay, people on that point took the piss. I would take the piss back in 2013 and go, does anybody read your magazine? You'll be dead in about 4 years' time. So, that's what I would have fired back at them. But anyway, they managed to put in the spin that it sold 700 copies. In England, it did. Funnily enough, the country that loved it was Sweden. It sold 7,000 copies.
Oh, okay.
So it did I think it did roughly, just under 20,000.
Okay.
But that's still not a justifiable amount that we spent over £200,000 making Kevin's record.
I wanted to talk briefly about Malcolm McLaren, who you befriended at one time. And
we did a Punch interview in 1996, and really, to be honest, it was like, from that Punch interview, we then became pals with each other. It was a kind of bad start, because I was doing an interview with him, and I kind of won the interview, if you know what I mean, because I kind of like, I kind of came well prepared, if you knew what I'm saying, and I slayed him, really, to be honest, and but we exchanged phone numbers, and we stayed in touch, and really I started having Malcolm McLaren seminars, really, I suppose, personal ones at the Ivy once a month for about the next 4 years. So I got to know him pretty well.
So you would buy him dinner, he would talk to you?
I bought dinner for 4 hours, but for 8 to 12, right, once a month whenever I was in town. And Malcolm would speak for 3 hours, 45 minutes. When he was eating his dinner, he would go, what are you up to?
But I think there's a lesson in there somewhere that I think that's one of the things that you've always had. If you want to learn, you speak to people that you feel have learnt more than you, have made it somehow. You make the effort to spend time with them. He
was an amazing man, I mean, it was there's a side to Malcolm nobody will ever know, and I won't go spilling on him either, but he used to have to change cities quite a lot when the heat got too much.
Yeah.
And he moved to Paris quite soon after I became... He was in London for about 5 or 6 years, and then he went to Paris, and then he ended up in New York.
He was going to stand for mayor, wasn't he?
Well, we put him up.
You put up the deposit, didn't you?
Yeah, well, just at the end of creation, probably about October, he said, I should stand for the Mayor of London, and you should put me up for it. Kind of avoided the issue. I was like, yeah, but it sounds like a good laugh, Malcolm. And, never thought too much about it, Iain. And then I was with my sister and her husband and Kate, and we were having a family holiday in Nevis in the Caribbean, and it was in the days of fax machines, and the people were running over all the time with faxes from the English papers going, like, Alan McGee's put Malcolm McLaren up for the Mayor of London. He'd announced that I was putting him up for the Mayor of London. So after about the fourth fax of like the Evening Standard and all these people running, saying McGee's put Malcolm McLaren up, I just kind of got into it and thought, do you know what? This is so mental. I kind of like it. So I did put Malcolm up for Mayor.
And you got Sony that paid a £20,000 deposit.
I did do, yes.
And told them
that it was an art project.
Brilliant.
Well, what I said to them was, it was like, because I could still write the checks, I could walk in and go, Iain McNay, flower decoration, 50 grand. They'd have to write it because I owned 68% of the company. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, or like 68% of our 51%.
Yeah.
So they had to take me seriously.
Yeah.
So I was on the checkbook. So I went in and just went, Malcolm McLaren for Mayor of London. And they were like, you could see them thinking, we've got to get this guy off the checkbook. And they were like, why? And I'm like, it's an art project. Which it kind of was, you know, it's justifiable as an art project because only creation would put Malcolm McLaren up for the Mayor of London.
Anyway, this was kind of the end of creation, wasn't it? This
Yeah,
point?
it was
you
the
and
end.
Dick were not enjoying it anymore.
After Kevin, you know, and dressing up in lingerie, female lingerie, and putting Malcolm up for Mayor, I think Sony finally had enough of me, and I think that was the end, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how was that for you?
I was fine with that, really, to be honest, because I did enough of Sony, to be honest.
And the bands? How was it for the bands?
I think it was harder for the bands. I think the only person that was unaffected by it was Noel Gallagher. Because when I told him, he went, we won, they didn't. Liam, I would say, probably never quite. I mean, he got over it now, I'm sure, but at the time, you know, I remember he phoned me up about 6 months after it, saying something like, "Oh, you left us to the tabloids," and you know, as if it was this. I mean, there was no move, there was no Machiavellian move. I just didn't want to deal with the tab.
Yeah.
I'd get fed up with it, you know. I mean, I was a bit like, you know, I'd get bored with that whole thing of dealing with tabloids. It wasn't why I entered music to be in the bloody tabloids, you know. And then so he didn't take it well. Bobby said he took it well, but he didn't really take it well. Do you know what I mean? You know, because in the film he's bitching about, his promotion and Exterminator. So I don't think any of them took it well. I know Ed Ball, I've barely seen him really, you know, post that. So I mean, it's really sad for Ed in some ways because we were putting out 3 or 4 albums a year, Ed Ball, you know, and paying him a wage.
He was your most prolific artist.
Yeah, he was. And there was, there's, you know, Bobby, luckily, you know, we're on good footing with, and, you know, Ed, hopefully, you know, we'll get back at some point, but yeah, people did take it quite badly.
Yeah. But you went on to start Poptones. You denounced the record industry pretty much and said that selling records was over. Yeah. And you formed a new company with some backers and you started Poptones.
Yeah, well, I wanted it to be digital, really. I suppose I wanted it to be iTunes before iTunes. And it wasn't, you know, the record business wasn't ready for that. But that's kind of what our mantra really was. We wanted it to be digital. We had a big digital website. It was...
Yeah, there's a quote again from the book. You wanted a forward-looking record company with the creation spirit.
Yeah.
A good combination.
Yeah. Well, the creation spirit was, you know... Why it works with the 359 thing is we've got...
We should explain, just so people that don't know it, 359's the label you started with Trero, which is my company, and we'll come on to that. We're going to do a kind of a part 4, so we'll come on to that.
Okay,
yeah.
well, but I would say what I'm good at is the front end. I'm good at the bands, dealing with the bands, the interviews, choosing the singles. You know, like if I've got to make a call to Radio 2, I know the guy, blah, blah, blah. I'm good at that end of it. The back end of it, of like how many records to press and how many records got into HMV, I'm not good at that part. And I've never said I was, and that's really, like Poptones you know, that's where I probably failed, which was like, you know, I didn't understand that I wasn't up to that particular part yet.
So do you see Poptones as a failure now?
No, I don't. I think we actually did some good stuff. I mean, I think Hives, we brought the Hives
Hives
worldwide.
had a big album.
Yeah. The Cosmics
Cosmic
were
Rough
pretty
Riders,
good. A good version of Teenage Fan Club.
Yeah.
REM. And Box of Rebellion came out of that as well.
Yeah.
So we'd for a short-lived label, we had some good success.
Yeah. And then it was time to close that down as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just got to a point of, I think it was because, Iain, I was 47 by that point, and from the age of 17, I'd been in punk bands and stuff like that, you know, 16, 17. And so I'd been in the pop business 30 years, and I just think I don't think I knew who even I was. And that's what Wales was about, you know. I don't mean I consciously went down to find myself, but that's what I did do.
So you bought a house with Kate.
Yeah,
in
I had
Wales.
already had the house. I bought that in '97, and we'd done it up. It was ready by '99. We used it as a holiday home for a long time, and people used to go down and record albums there. Like Bobby would do writing there, and the Libertines would do writing there.
Well, okay, let's look at the Libertines,
Yeah.
because
Well,
Libertines
that was during the Poptones thing.
Okay, so you got involved as managing Libertines.
Well, I got shoved in here. I didn't even want to do it. That's the
But
joke.
let's put it in context. The Libertines were already a controversial band.
Yeah, but they were 36 in the charts.
Yeah, but
That's the
the
highest
two
they'd ever
members,
been.
principal members, Carl Barat and Pete Doherty, were not easy characters, were they? Not together.
Carol Barat's pretty easy to deal with, to be
together
honest.
They weren't.
Yeah, but together, you know, it's petrol and water at times, you know, and you know, it's, you know, it just doesn't match.
I must mention the story of when you first met Pete Doherty and you were deciding whether to manage the band or not.
Yeah.
You spent an evening with him and you said, right, let's play our 5 favourite records.
Yeah, that's true.
So what were your 5 favourite records?
Well, my favourite, I can't remember the Beatles songs, but it was 5 Beatles songs. So it was like probably Hello, Goodbye, Hey Jude, Taylor Skelter, blah, 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 right? Whatever it would be, right? And Doherty went and chose 5 Chaz and Dave songs.
Was he being serious?
And I was back on the booze at that point for a couple of years, and so I had a few beers with him at the bar, and he just said, "Oh, Matt," he wanted me to manage. He was really into Baby Shambles at this point. He went, "Oh, do you want to manage the Baby Shambles?"
Yeah.
And Rough Trade, James Endicott had wanted me to do, because of my dealings with Primal Scream, he'd wanted me to do it because of Primal Scream. So it was kind of obvious, I suppose, if you think about it. Well, if you can deal with Primals, you can probably deal with the Libertines. And if you talk about it in a commercial way, I probably did deal with it quite well because it became #1 and sold 1 million records. But I don't think... Russell Warby, their agent, said to me, "Alan, all you were ever doing was putting an elastoplast on something that was, you know, it was an open wound."
Yeah.
So, do you know what I mean? You know, so I think, you know, it was what it was. You know,
But you were brave to take it on because
I was maybe stupid to take it on, but it was fitting. I mean, they were in the context of the great bands that I've worked with from the Mary Chain onwards. They were one of the great ones. So,
yeah.
do you know, I mean, funnily enough, now to a whole new generation of kids, that's kind of vaguely what I'm known for, much more than Oasis. You know, I manage the Libertines.
Yeah.
You know, like if you say McGee, oh yeah, you manage the Libertines.
And you had them both at your house in Wales,
yeah.
to write some songs together. What happened there?
I went to bed. They were playing "Don't Look Back in Anger." I got up, went down and made myself a coffee, was sitting about 9:45 in the morning. Carol Barat came in there. And I thought he had a Halloween mask on, because it was about this time of the year, 93 or something, 94, I can't remember when. 93 probably. And he came in and his eye was hanging out his head. It was kind of mental. It was as if somebody had poured, you know, ketchup over his head, which was blood, and he had his eye hanging out his head. And it took me about 3 seconds to realise it was real. And then I was really shocked, right? And then I couldn't drive, and we were like literally parked up.
So you thought he'd had a fight with Pete?
I of course thought that Doherty had just come out of prison, was up the stairs and asleep, and I thought he did a punch up. At first anyway, he didn't have, but I thought that's what had happened. So I phoned the local farmer, who's my pal, and we drove off to Brecon Hospital, and then we ended up at Hereford Hospital. And it was quite funny going to the hospitals, because the hospitals thought that I'd done it to Carol.
Yeah.
So they were asking him really leading questions, wanting him to finger me for like this assault. And like, he'd assaulted himself.
But what did happen? So.
Oh no, well, they drank, Pete's mum had given Carol a whiskey bottle with Irish whiskey in it, about this big. Carol, being fond of the juice, had done about half of it. They'd get into an argument over some girl. I really don't know what the argument genuinely was about. I don't actually know if I ever want to know. And Carol, who at that point was into kind of a bit of self-destruction, decided to headbutt the sink. I mean, he must have hit it pretty hard, because I know Kate had to pay 400 quid back in the day to get my sink sorted. Do you know what I mean? And it's a big marble sink, Ian.
Wow.
I don't know if I've ever shown you at my house. But anyway,
You showed me the room, yeah.
Yeah. It's a proper sink. If you even fell and bumped into it, you would have a bruise, you know.
Because at one point you had to hire 2 bodyguards, didn't you, to keep
Well,
them
that was the
apart?
next stage. That was by March, and we'd played, maybe it was February, but we'd already done 3 forums, which is the old Town and Country, sold them, and then I'd put 3 Brixton academies, sold them, right? So it was like we were on a roll, man, right? You know, because I knew, because I followed the internet, that I knew that the support was underneath the surface. Rough Trade at this point, Ian, thought I was mad putting 3 Brixtons on hold. They actually, they were going, they've never played anywhere bigger than the ICA. Do you know what I mean? You know, Rough Trade, this is after, just before we did 3 forums, they were like, they've never had, in a way, Rough Trade were quite right to be that protective, because they were like, there's nothing to suggest. It's like me telling you to press 20,000 John Lennon McCulloch records now. Why? Because I think so. Do you know what I mean? And you going, but there's no logic to that argument. Well, there was no logic to put on 3 forums, but we sold them.
So instinctively you knew that was
I knew because of the internet, or because I follow the internet, you know.
Yeah. There's a wonderful quote, which I'm going to read, which we'll get into. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left. When you say at the end of the book, the Stones are too old, Bono's going blind, Chris Martin's a geography teacher. Is that really how you feel about the music industry?
It was that day. I mean, I don't know, I hope Bono's not going blind, and Chris Martin does remind me of a geography teacher, if I was being honest. And the Stones are too old. Do you know what I mean? You know, like, you know, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, what age are they? About 70-year-old, and they've all got 19-year-olds here.
They look old.
Come on, I mean, it's like,
but they look old.
I mean, I'm bald. It is what it is, right? But all these rock stars with hair with 20 years. There's a thing up in Manchester. There's a laser company that does. I won't go naming and shaming the rock stars, but you've only got to go and look at receding hairlines, and you know that suddenly everybody's got like full head of hair again, you know, like 4 years later. It's a bit like, there's a lot of that going on. Do you know what I mean? I don't think it's just Wayne Rooney, dude.
And almost the last sentence of the book, or the last chapter, talks about you doing some DJing at this time.
Yeah.
And you have the pinnacle of your DJing success.
Yeah.
And it's the wedding, is it, Robert Plant's son?
Yeah. Well, I'm still friends with all that mob, but it's like, but Robert phoned me up and said, will you come and DJ my kid's wedding? And I went, well, I'm in Mexico City. And he was in New York. And I've always got on great with Robert. And I went and put on the first record that night. And me being a twisted, you know, loony, I put on Lola. And he, which is basically about, you know, what do you want to call it, a transsexual?
It is.
Yeah. And Jimmy and Robert are so twisted, they got up and had the first dance.
So Jimmy Page, Robert Plant dancing to
but
Lola.
the great thing was, on that building that I bought, the Poptones office was in, because I bought it really in '97 for like 700 grand or something. We used to rent it out to rock stars doing interviews and stuff like that. And Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin used to, well, Robert Plant used to rent it the whole time for their stuff. So I was always running into Page, and I was always like, I don't know if you must have people like that gobsmack you, but I was gobsmacked every time I met Page.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I was like, you know, Robert, I'm cool with. Robert's just my pal.
Yeah.
I meet Robert socially and we'll go for dinner, but you know, meet Mick Jones socially, you go for dinner. But you meet Jimmy Page. And there was a really funny time with Jimmy Page. It was a good story that should be in Creation too, if there is ever another book. Charlie had lost her little band. She was only about 6 or 7. And at the top of the stairs at Gatwick Airport, Kate was away getting the train tickets, right? Me and Charlie are standing at the top of the stairs while Kate's away getting the train tickets before we go down at Gatwick Airport. And who at the top of the stairs is standing but Jimmy Page, right? And this is about 2007, 2008, right? And I said to Jimmy, I said, this is Charlie. I said, she's forgotten, you know, her little band. This is the truth, Iain. Jimmy Page went into his pocket and went, I've got one. Would you like it? Just completely mad. What was he doing with a kid's band in his pocket? And I said to Jimmy Page, I went, oh, she's lost her kind of like, you know, one of these little bands that these kids have, not even rubber at these days. It's kind of like cloth, but Charlie was upset. She was like 8 or 7. And 7, I think. And I went, oh, she's lost it. And Jimmy Page, it was always like I always pick a pocket or two. Went in, opened his coat and pulled out a band. And we were like, see ya. Do you know what I mean? You know, it's completely mad. I don't know if I've seen Jimmy since then.
So you have a new adventure now. You've come back to a record label. You have this partnership with me and Cherry Red, 359 Music. We only have a few minutes left, but just why did you want to restart being in the record business?
It's a pretty long story, but I'll try and keep it quick. I got ill, and I was in bed for 2 months with illness. I had that weird flu that everybody had. That was 5 weeks, and then I got better, and then I got 3 weeks of the norovirus. And I went to this doctor in Harley Street, and he just looked at all my blood tests, and he just went, you know, your testosterone's smashed to bits, and it's taking it out of you, blah, blah, blah. Take these legal prescription drugs, like, you know, and so he gave me different drugs, like vitamin D, you know, anti-cholesterol, all these different things. Took them all, boom. I mean, I already wanted to do the label, but, you know, because in my back of my head, I wanted to do it, but Takashi wasn't getting it together. But the minute I got on these drugs, suddenly I got the label together, I got the book together, I lost 34 pounds. It was like, you know when they say about transhumanism and they talk about you have a reboot of your immune system?
You had a reboot.
I had a reboot. Yeah. I mean, I have now, I even ran.
Refresh.
Well, what happened to you the other day? I was in Hay&Y, and it was monsoon weather in Hay&Y, which it usually is anyway, right? And I ran from the Curry House, which I was standing sheltering, to the Swan Hotel. It's only about 400 yards, right? I'm 53, I ran, Iain, I wasn't even out of breath, and I suddenly went to Kate when I got back, let's get a running machine. So it's a bit like, I've had a reboot. So that just shows you, these drugs are now all on the market and they're legal, and they reboot you. You know, I mean, did I want to do the label? Yeah, but would I have come back with such vigour? I'm not sure I would have. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I remember you phoning me up at the very beginning of the discussion. I just went on the different drugs to reboot my system, and I think you went, "How are you?" And I went, "I'm rocking." And you were like, "Oh my God, she's back on drugs." but you know, I probably am back on drugs, but I'm on legal drugs, and they're good.
Yeah. So we have like 2 minutes left. So 359. We have 6 acts. Yeah. And you're enjoying it, aren't you?
Well, I'm enjoying putting out these records, but I'm enjoying the experience because I've never actually got on with a record company before. And what I made a decision not to over-involve myself. I don't ask you what records sell. I don't ask you. I don't ask you any of the old Alan type questions of how many you're shipping and doing this and doing that. And all I deal with is finding music, and the good thing about your company is that there's 600, albums released a year. There's no time for Matt Bristol or Adam Valeska to have an ego. Do you know what I mean? Because there's too many records coming out. Because if they have an ego, they're going to miss a record. So it's the first time I think I've ever ran into a record company that we don't. I mean, I'm used to dealing with Rob Dickens and Lucien Grange.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? These guys have got big egos.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And your company's full of people that are just trying to keep up with putting the records out. Do you know what I mean? So there's no time. If somebody wanted to have an ego, there isn't any ego. Yeah. So it works for me, man.
Okay, we're going to have to finish now. We're going to do a kind of unofficial part 4 because we have some more time.
Yeah.
And we're going to look, I think, in more detail, because I'm interested in this, why certain bands happen and why certain bands don't happen.
Yeah.
So we get more into the psychology and the reasons why the success and why certain people just with great songs just don't make it.
Yeah.
So thanks very much for coming along and doing the part 3.
All right.
Your new autobiography, Alan McGee, Creation Songs, Riots, Raves and Running a Label, is out in November 2013. And I'm going to show again, because I really like the documentary Upside Down, which is the story of Creation Records. So thank you, Alan.
Cheers.
And we'll see you in a kind of unofficial part 4 shortly.
All right.
And thank you, everyone, for watching Cherry Red TV, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.